Hello and welcome to Estates Gazette's monthly market update. I'm Nadia Elgamri, the data editor at Estates Gazette. In this month's podcast, it's all about recovery. Retail finally seems to be coming back, with empty shops filling up. But while London and the South East are getting better, the North and North East are getting worse. Markets editor Noella Peer-Kivlahan asked LDC's Matthew Hopkinson if the improvements are here to stay.
This is Noella Peer-Kivlahan and I'm here at Estates Gazette headquarters with Matthew Hopkinson, Director of the local data company. Matthew, thank you very much for coming in to see us.
My pleasure.
With the news that LDC released just recently, with the good news that there has been a fall in the vacancy rates, shop vacancy rates, which are at their lowest for 4 years. Can you explain why this is, and can we expect to see the trend continue?
Absolutely. So the first thing, the trend is continuing into 2014. We're seeing it come down, and I think what is interesting is that this is shops being reoccupied. It's not being removed from the stock, so it's not some kind of artificial mathematic number. What's significant is back in July 2010, we'd basically seen since 2008 a climb from about 3 or 4% up to 14.6%, and in December that came down to 13.9, but actually had been very stable, around about 14% for nearly 2 years. So in terms of what we're seeing, that's the top level, but actually what is very interesting is you're seeing that England and Scotland are fairly similar in number, but actually Wales is quite an outlier at nearly 16% where that stands. And then actually regionally, there is a north-south divide. We've all been aware of it, but what is interesting is that the London and the South, and indeed parts of the Midlands, are getting better, and the North and the North East are actually getting marginally worse. So we are seeing polarisation within the regions. And then lastly, within these regions, you're seeing a big marked difference between size of centres. So the larger centres are doing better. They generally have the bigger offer, the day out type element. The medium, the secondary centres, the Stockports and the Wolverhamptons, it's very difficult for them. They've got a lot of stock, and actually a lot of retailers have left those locations to move into the larger locations. And then finally you've got the small town locations, which have really come to life again with the rise of independent retailers, and also the convenience offer, that people aren't so much doing the weekly shop. It's more about top-up shopping and convenience shopping and shop local.
So we really are seeing the retail landscape completely change from maybe 5 years ago.
We are, and I think we're seeing it in terms of the performance of locations. But what is also interesting, because vacancy is just one side of the coin, in March we'll be publishing our opens and closures rates of businesses. And what is interesting is, while some locations may have low vacancy, you've seen a structural shift and what many would call a decline in offer. So they've lost the Woolworths and the HMVs and perhaps some of the Arcadia Group shops, and they've been replaced by charity shops, pawnbrokers, tattoo parlours, and perhaps actually a number of the supermarket convenience format stores.
Is that almost a bad thing for the market that we're getting? I know we've talked about this before, but too many charity shops and the likes, and even betting shops are on the rise.
Well, I think what's interesting about that is obviously the supply and demand. So there's nothing we can do. The stock is sitting there, and obviously charity shops have done very well in the recession, and why wouldn't they? And plus they've got 80% business rate relief. So I think too much of one thing is a bad thing, and I think those towns which are healthy and thriving have a very good mix. And earlier in 2013 we did a retail and leisure diversity index with Oxford University, and I think that sort of shows the kind of places that when you ask the person on the street where would they rather go to, it's places which have this diversity of offer, both in terms of type of retailer, chains and independents, but also the retail and leisure diversity, the eating and greeting and meeting, the shopping, the browsing, and then entertainment. People love entertainment. Put an ice wall in your shopping centre or something like that, it'll pull the crowds in.
Now you mentioned supermarkets taking over some of this space for their local offers. We have seen mixed messages from the supermarkets, particularly in response to their Christmas figures, and even Sainsbury's has said that they don't expect a brilliant 2014. What kind of signal is that sending to the market?
Well, I think it's very interesting. So a lot of the supermarkets obviously are based in big big warehouse block locations, the supermarkets we all remember, and even bigger if you're Asda or indeed Morrison's. And when you had large volumes going through, they were probably quite profitable locations. Now we're seeing the volumes come down, they're less slow, so they are less profitable. But I think what is interesting is that opening these convenience formats, which has 3,000 square feet, it's quite an expensive exercise. And actually the expectation of the consumer is that the pint of milk should not vary between the Tesco Extra and the Tesco Express. And therefore it does hit your margins.
And what about the rest of the year, Matthew? From LDC's point of view, what are your predictions for 2014?
So far I think we've got some positive news in terms of the reoccupation of space. I think we're going to continue to see this structural change in the type of occupation, but I also think we're going to see this increasing divergence between the best out there and the worst out there in terms of their performance. I think that the supermarkets could have some challenging results, because I think we've seen their profitability, and I think the interesting one for 2014 is profitability and sales. And I think that we've seen this with the rise of the Poundlands, and the 99p stores have started to hit them as well. And I think most importantly, we've got to come back to the consumer who drives all of this. So one, technology is driving it faster than ever before, and we've seen the rollout of 4G in tablets. So it's very much about having an optimised website so people can click, collect, walk in, do whatever they want to do to actually engage with you as a customer. We need to keep inflation down, and particularly we've seen food inflation at its highest in the UK rather than anywhere in Europe. And then lastly, I think it's quite important that we keep interest rates down, because I think that will have a huge impact on consumer confidence and what they're going to have to spend going forward into 2014. But generally I think the outlook is positive, and I think we're starting to see an uptake and therefore greater prospects for most but not all town centres, retail parks and shopping centres.
Great. Well, Matthew, thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you.